It is just before 6 a.m. Eastern Time as I'm recording this. Republican former President Donald Trump is projected to win the White House for a second time. And Republicans have taken back control of the Senate.
Thank you very much. Wow.
A little after 2:30 this morning Eastern Time, Trump walked out on a convention center stage in Palm Beach, Florida. He had just been projected as the winner of Pennsylvania's electoral votes. He was surrounded by a big group. Staffers, lots of family members. His wife, Melania Trump, stood next to him. They smiled and looked out at a huge crowd. Trump seemed surprised.
Political thing. Look what happened. Is this crazy? But it's a political victory that our country has never seen before, nothing like this. I want to thank the American people for the extraordinary honor of being elected your 47th president and your 45th president.
Trump's path to victory started to take hold after 11 p.m. That's when North Carolina was declared a win for Trump. It was the first swing state to be called. Then, after midnight, Georgia was called for Trump, another swing state. Not long after that, Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign co-chair, Cedric Richmond, spoke to a large crowd of her supporters. They were gathered at her alma mater, Howard University in Washington, D.C.
We will continue overnight to fight to make sure that every vote is counted, that every voice has spoken. So you won't hear from the vice president tonight, but you will hear from her tomorrow. She will be back here tomorrow to address not only the HU family, not only to address her supporters, but to address the nation.
The evening at Howard and in bars nearby had started as a party. But the mood shifted quickly after those first swing state calls. And the calls that kept coming. Wins for Trump. From the newsroom of The Washington Post, this is Post Reports. I'm Martine Powers. It is Wednesday, November 6th, the day after a high-stakes presidential election, and the first time that we will be in your feed today. We wanted to bring you the latest on the results as soon as possible this morning. Later today, we'll return with another episode. We'll dig in this afternoon with more analysis of what we've seen play out in the last 24 hours. Donald Trump surpassed the 270 electoral votes he needed to win the election around 5:40 this morning. That was secured once Wisconsin was called for him. He is the second president to win non-consecutive terms. Grover Cleveland was the first. And Trump has also made history as the first felon elected to the White House. My colleague Aaron Blake, co-host of the Campaign Moment podcast, has been following the count through the night. Here's how he broke it down at about 3 o'clock this morning.
The results we saw on Tuesday night and into Wednesday morning in one way seem kind of surprising, but they were also very much within the range of possibilities that we were talking about here. We had a very close race, but there are margins of error in these polls, and a lot of these states swung towards Trump about the size of that margin of error.
Aaron says one initial takeaway is that Black and Hispanic voters and working class voters definitely trended in Trump's direction. And he says there's also a bigger story.
I think if you look at the map, and we have a map of all of the shifts in counties nationwide, what you will see is a sea of red. This was not just in working class areas and rural areas, but also in a lot of suburban areas, a lot of areas with more educated voters, a lot of areas with the kinds of voters that Democrats really want to appeal to. So this seemed to be much more about a kind of large-scale repudiation of the Biden administration. People did not like the direction of the country. They had reservations about inflation. They didn't like what happened on the border earlier in the Biden administration. And they went for the candidate who represented change. I also think it's telling that if you look at the exit polls, Kamala Harris was not an unpopular candidate. She was viewed favorably by nearly half of voters. But what you did see is that among the approximately 1 in 10 voters who liked neither her nor Donald Trump won them by more than 20 points. That is pointing in the direction of a change candidate winning because people don't like the status quo. I think there are a number of questions about what happens from here. Certainly, the Republican Party is going to be even less of an impediment to Donald Trump than they were before. You know, back in the Trump presidency, we had Republicans in the Senate, especially, occasionally standing in Trump's way. I think that given Trump has now won a second term, that is going to be less of a situation.
And on top of that, again, Republicans have also taken back Senate control with this election. So let's talk about that for a moment. That happened with two critical wins. West Virginia Governor Jim Justice won the Senate race in his state. And in Ohio, car dealer Bernie Moreno beat longtime Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown. Moreno spoke to his supporters last night. He thanked Trump and pledged to reduce the size and scale of the federal government.
Now, that starts by getting rid of agencies that we don't need, relocating them out of Washington, D.C. We're going to have a bold and ambitious agenda for the Republican Party. And I know that President Trump is going to bring greatness back to this country unlike anything we've ever seen.
There was also some history made in a couple of Senate races. For the first time ever, the Senate will have two Black women serving at the same time. Democrat Lisa Blunt Rochester of Delaware and Maryland Democrat Angela Alsobrooks. Alsobrooks nodded to the significance of her election during her victory speech last night.
Now, it's remarkable to think that in 2 years, America will celebrate its 250th birthday. And in all those years, there have been more than 2,000 people who have served in the United States Senate, and only 3 have looked like me.
There is still a tight battle for the House of Representatives as vote counts continue to come in. That's something we're watching closely. Abortion measures were on the ballot in 10 states, and the results were mixed. In deep red Missouri, for example, a ballot measure to enshrine abortion rights in the state constitution is projected to win, overturning one of the most restrictive abortion bans in the country. But in Florida, voters rejected a measure to protect abortion rights. That will leave Florida's 6-week abortion ban intact. There was an expectation going into this presidential election that the issue of reproductive rights could help carry Vice President Harris to victory. My colleague Aaron says that's one of the many questions facing the party right now. What opportunities were missed to connect with voters?
Democrats are going to do a lot of soul searching and seek a lot of accountability for how this could have happened. I think they're going to look at how they can adjust their messaging to appeal to the voters that they've lost in the Black and Hispanic communities, in the working class communities. And then finally, I think a big question and something we're all thinking about right now is what happens in a Trump second term. Is he more unleashed with fewer people around him to question him as he surrounds himself with more loyalists, and especially as he no longer has another campaign to run? He will not have to consider the costs of his actions, and that could embolden him to do things that he may not have attempted before. Things like mass deportation, things like pardoning the January 6th defendants. I think we're all thinking a lot about those things, and I'm sure we'll be talking about them.
We will be talking about them. and about something that another colleague noted last night, our chief correspondent Dan Balz, what this election says about America in 2024.
This is a divided country, and it was a divided country before Donald Trump, and it is a more divided country than it was when he came in. It's divided almost evenly, as we know. It's an almost 50-50 country. And so as you watch this election unfold, basically what you have are two different Americas voting. You have, one America which is clearly behind Kamala Harris and another that is clearly behind Donald Trump. They have different values. They have different issue priorities. They have different views of the world. They have a different sense of what America is and where it's going, hopes and dreams. And there is a tug of war in this country over which direction we're going to go.
That's it for this very early morning episode of Post Reports. For much more on the election results, go to the Washington Post app or website. Today's show was produced and mixed by Rennie Svirnovskiy, with help from Peter Bresnan, Charla Freeland, and Elana Gordon. It was edited by Renita Jablonski, Monica Campbell, and Maggie Penman. Thank you to Mo Rodman. I'm Martine Powers. We'll see you back here in just a few hours.